Hello and welcome back. Today I'm gonna give an example of how to use in-context editing to add a hinge to this box from the last tutorial. So let's dive right into it. So first I'm creating an assembly of that box. I want both parts, so I can just insert the part studio. I'm going to fix the bottom, and now I haven't made it the lid yet, and it's floating, and I'm not going to touch it yet. Now let's say I want to insert the hinge that we were working on the last couple tutorials. So now I've got my box and I've got my hinge, but I don't really have a good reference to mate it to. So I'm gonna jump back into the part studio, and there's actually a very convenient way we can do it after the split. I do have in my construction solid, I have this line which is where the edge of the flange of the lid is, so that's actually a great reference. So we're going to create a mate connector right here in the middle of it, and change the owner not to be part 1, which is the construction solid, but the box half. Now I can OK, make sure you roll to the end again, and now if I go back to my assembly, I now have this mate connector, so I can start a mate using M shortcut. I'm gonna grab one of the mate connectors and put in the hinge, and this. And now I want to make sure that's the wrong orientation, so I can use the A key to flip, and that looks correct now. And I'm gonna rename that hinge to box. And here we go. Now, obviously, I'm gonna hit K to hide the mate connectors, because I don't need to see them. Now you have this hinge that's not really positioned in any specific way, but you'll notice I have the show mates mode, and when that's active it will show mates for anything that you mouse over. So the box shows the mate we just added, and this part shows the revolute in for the hinge. But if I click on this, this will persist. And one good trick is that if I actually click on the mate itself, it will give me a readout of any degrees of freedom. And not only can you see it, so if you move, if you drag it, it will update, but you can actually double click and set a value for the position of this mate, which is quite useful. So I have now my hinge kind of where I want it, but obviously the lid wasn't designed with clearance for the hinge. So what we're going to do is edit the lid in context. You can do this by right clicking, edit in context, or if you actually double click the part in the tree, it will switch back to the part studio. And now you'll see it says assembly 1 displayed, and this is kind of blue-gray. So the context is not actually created. So if I just canceled and went back to the assembly, nothing has actually happened yet until I reference the context, which I'm going to do now. So it's actually quite simple. All I need to do really, I'm going to go back before the mirror and use a move face to move this face of the flange. I will go up to entity and then pick that face of the hinge, and you can see it's moving that flange away. And now it needs some mounting holes for that hinge, so I'm going to create a sketch on here, make the lid transparent using Shift T just to make it easier. Pick these two edges, use, and now I can get out of this, show the box again, and go right into a hole feature, and yes, up to entities. Yes, so we're going to go up to the inside face of the box, and we're going to use this sketch. Actually, it does not automatically pick up the center of the holes, but I'm going to use the center of the holes from here. And here we go, we have our hinge holes. Again, remember to roll to the end. And now if I go back to my assembly, I now have my holes and my flange hanging up. And I can now mate the lid. I'm going to do this using M, which starts a fasten mate. Grab this, hold shift key to stay on this face, pick the far end of the hole, and this edge of the hinge. I'm going to call that lid to hinge. Now I have a mated lid. Now obviously it can spin all the way around, which may not be what you want. So we would like to add a limit, but we didn't put a limit in hinge itself because we didn't know what it would be. But you can do that easily by adding a mate here at this level. And there's many different ways you could do it. It doesn't really matter. The one thing to keep in mind is to avoid over constraining things too much. So the best, or a good way to do this is to use a cylindrical mate between basically this knuckle and this knuckle of the hinge. Now you can see the preview shows you the 0 position, and if you hit play, that's what it wants to do. So that tells us when we set limits, it's going to go in the negative direction. So we're going to set a maximum of 0 and a minimum of, I mean, we can play with different values, but probably a bit more than 90. So let's say negative 100. So you can't see much until you, okay, so we'll call that hinge limit. And here we go. That's our hinge. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now we have our first context, which is used to create the holes and move that flange. But it'd be nice to have something that actually limits the rotation. So what we can do is move the lid all the way to its open position, and here we can say create new context, and that will take us back to the part studio. And from here you can see things look a little bit weird, but it's okay. It's that's actually what we want. That's the box in its open position relative to the lid. And what we can do is again roll back before the mirror, and we're going to start a sheet metal flange on that edge. Excuse me. And for instead of bend angle, we'll say align to geometry and pick the face of our box. That's a bit big. Let's make that smaller. It looks like it's pretty close to those holes too, so we should probably do a partial flange. Let's put it in this middle section. And then for the end condition, we can use actually use the hinge itself that you can see from here. So we're going to use this with an offset of a couple millimeters maybe, but the other way. And now the last thing we have to do is do a move face to adjust that to be up to here. And that's basically it. Now if I go back to my assembly, I now have a flange that lines up perfectly with the open position of the lid. And some of you might have noticed earlier that the fact that these holes are placed based on the hinge position, which itself is mated to the box, which is effectively a circular reference, which in I think a lot of other CAD systems you probably would want to stay away from, but Onshape can actually handle that fairly well. So let's say I wanted to move the hinge a little bit further, because it should really be closer to the corner. So we've got 22 millimeters, maybe not, we would move it all the way, but move it like 15 or something like that. So we can switch to our Part Studio and do this by changing our make connector by, we want, let's say 15 in the negative X direction, something like that. But now, you will notice if I go back to my assembly, now my lid is out of whack. So let's move back here and undo that. Actually, I didn't really have to move back, but all we really have to do is make sure our lid is in the closed position. Then we can literally just suppress this one mate that ties the lid to the hinge. Right, so now our lid's just staying in place but not actually mated. And now if I go in here, edit my mate connector, move it by -15 again. Now if I go back to my assembly, now everything's fine except for the holes that don't line up. But all I need to do is right click on here. I guess I should have renamed these, but the first one is the one we use for the hinge. So if I just, actually I don't have to edit, I don't even have to edit. I can just go update context one. And you'll see the little blue dot means that there is an update available. And here we go, now the holes are okay again. And all we have to do is unsuppress the mate and you're back in business. Now that flange also doesn't go up to the hinge, so we can do the same thing. Move our lid to where it was, and then right click on there, update, and you can do it from both ends. So I can be in here as well, and let's just say, let's actually rename these. Context 2 is this, and context 1 was hinge holes. You'll see this one has a blue dot, which means there's an update available. Now the one thing you have to be careful when you do it from here is that if it will update based on the current position of the assembly, so you want to make sure your lid is open when you do that, which is why for something like this I would actually not do it from here, but do it from the assembly where I can see what's going on, just to make sure I'm doing it in the right position. And now if I update this, the flange should go up to where the hinge is again. And there you go. Here's an example of how to use in context to move that flange at the holes and make sure everything lines up properly, including creating circular references and how to manage them. Hope that was helpful, and see you soon for the next one.